I'm Tass Mellis of The Starters.
This is Ben Golliver with the Open Floor Podcast.
Hi, I'm Kristen Ludlow from NBA Inside Stuff.
I'm OG Anunoby of the Toronto Raptors.
Hey, I'm Elena Delon, and welcome to the Double Clutch.
Double Clutch.
Double Clutch. Double Clutch.
Double Clutch Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Double Clutch NBA podcast presented by NBA Store.eu. Remember to use our code DCPOD15 for 15% off all your NBA gear at the checkout. I'm your user host, Matthew Wellington, and I'm joined tonight once again by Mike Miller with his shoes on.
No shoes on.
No shoes on.
You never get this right.
Well,
how do you not know what I have on my feet?
Sometimes you're in like a sauna and sometimes you're in Barbados.
Always a sauna. I am in barefoot, shorts, and a UCLA Bruins t-shirt.
Oh, that's a strange mix.
Not really. Well, I suppose it is for late December, mid to late December.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't go walking outside in that at the moment, considering it's supposed to be the coldest week of the year.
Well, it's not technically true, as in, like, I wouldn't go outside in it. I have been outside in it today. I might have put shoes on.
Oh, dear. And to appease all the New York Knicks fans that we seem to piss off as a weekly trait of this podcast, we have actually got a Knicks fan, and his name is actually Nick. So, yeah, that's cool. Hi, Nick.
Thanks for having me on, guys. It's a real pleasure. Just a couple of things I'd like to get out there right away. I saw this as episode 317. I'm devastated I did not make my debut on 316 and could have made T-shirts saying Whitfield 316. As a pro wrestling fan, that would have meant a lot to me.
If only I had some kind of witty retort to come back with, but I don't, because I have not watched wrestling in about 20 years. But yeah,
you don't tend to do well when people bring things up like wrestling or football. You just don't watch anything. You just watch basketball.
Yeah, that's true. That is the limit of my interests.
I can assure you, Mike, it is very cool for adults to watch professional wrestling.
I did hear that J.E. Skeets still watches it on one of the starters pods this week or last week. Well, it was Monday, so it must be some point over the weekend I heard it. So you are not alone. I know at least two of you pointing.
Wrestling is still a thing. But for those of you who do not know, Nick has actually been part of Double Clutch for quite a long time now. He sort of differs away in the background doing all the social media stuff and looking at our Google statistics and things like that.
And Nick writing some cool, obscure stuff.
And writing some very strange, obscure, very brilliant stuff featuring lots of GIFs and film references that you have to watch things other than basketball to understand. So Mike has no chance with those.
Yep. No, actually, that's not true. A lot of these films in my wheelhouse, like Bill and Ted. I mean,
of course.
Who doesn't have that in their wheelhouse?
Right, I guess there's probably some millennials listening to the show that wouldn't have seen it.
No, we're already 3 minutes in. They've turned off again.
And the second week in a row, we've bashed it. So, Nick, do you just want to introduce yourself quickly to all the fans who are listening?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of basketball context, I've been got into the basketball in the early to mid 90s. I remember staying up to watch crazy all-star games featuring MJ and all those guys. Became a Knicks fan to my ultimate, I'm not going to say regret, but to my eternal suffering afterwards. I did watch them go to the finals twice, unsuccessfully, it has to be said. And now I'm looking at Carmelo Anthony going to the Blazers, thinking he could probably actually add something to this Knicks team. So there, all goes roundabout in the end.
Brilliant. And you've been on other podcasts as well, where you were given the title of the UK's biggest Knicks fan, isn't that right?
Oh, yeah.
Controversially, it has to be said, yeah.
Brilliant. I do like how anti-Knicks we get accused of being all the time, and then it's a catch-22 again. And then last week you picked a Knicks game as the game of the week to watch,
and I still got stick.
Lo and behold, a Boston fan gave you shit for it. That's brilliant.
Hey, I think I came out right with that one because that game ended up being a cracker, and somehow the Mavs were swept by the Knicks this season, which is something I don't think many teams would be proud of saying has happened this year. But yeah, no, it's odd. We have a lot of Knicks fans who help write for the site and do bits and bobs, and we also have a lot of Celtics fans, and those are two of the teams that we tend to talk about quite a lot, and we still get stick for talking about both of them. So yeah, maybe we need to do a show in the future where we don't mention either of those two franchises. Do you think that's possible?
Amazing. That does sound amazing.
I have to say, with the Knicks this season, there's really not a lot to talk about. It's tough.
we could turn off the Knicks valve and not worry about them this season. But anyway, speaking of the Celtics, they lost last night to the Kings by a point, which was a bummer because that lost their I think it was going to be 11-game win streak. So I think Mo's had to take his smiley meme down on Twitter the last day because he was using that quite a lot about how good the Celtics were.
Did you see? So that, you know, the guy who jumped in to defend you, to like agree with you about the pick of the next game last week. I think he was called like Diego Maradobin or something.
Yeah.
He replied to Mo with the crying Jordan cut out over his face. It was amazing.
Oh, that's brilliant. But yeah, the Celtics lost that one last night, and it was back and forth. The Phoenix Suns they still somehow have a top 5 net rating and are in a playoff position. The Jazz offense has really started to click in the past week. Ja Morant has been unbelievable for the Grizzlies, even though they got blown out by the Nuggets last night. But they've beat the Spurs, the Hornets, and the Jazz all in the past sort of week. I think I took him as a pick for Rookie of the Year. I don't know if anyone. I think Nick, you might have done as well. Actually,
I think I did, just because I was going on a guard with heavy usage in today's NBA is always going to put up numbers. And Zion pre-injury, even then, I wasn't quite sure if he would score enough. That's not to say he can't, but just on a team with Brandon Ingram coming into his own and Redick and a load of other guys and Holiday, obviously, who are going to want to put shots up. I wasn't sure Zion would score or have the opportunity to score as much as Morant will.
Yeah, and playing alongside Jaren Jackson Jr. is obviously their top pick last year. They look like a pretty formidable partnership. The only problem that the Grizzlies have at the moment is they really struggle on the defensive end, but they're a young team, so I'd expect them to sort that out. Anthony Davis had 14 points and 1 rebound against the Hawks last night, and the Lakers won by 21 points. Paul George returned the other night and kicked the absolute crap out of the Atlanta Hawks as well, so it's been a dodgy week for them.
I liked that the Hawks had back-to-backs in the Staples Center.
Yeah.
That was amazing. So I just thought, what are the odds of the road team? And I know it can only happen in LA, but what are the odds of the road team having the back-to-backs? And now I'm going to probably find out it happens quite a lot, but it just stuck out like a sore thumb to me. And yeah, sorry, carry on.
Well, there's been a lot of Kobe Bryant slander in the Double Clutch general channel today after he was pictured at the Staples Center last night having several photo shoots with famous Lakers players, and that was all over Twitter when I woke up this morning, which was quite cool. But I knew that I had to put my helmet on as I logged into the Slack earlier on this afternoon, just to see everyone going off about how much they hate Kobe.
I think Kobe gets a fair amount of hate, but I think underneath people appreciate how good he was, but I just don't think he was as good as he thinks he was.
Yeah, I think it's gone beyond, and this is my opinion, I kind of got the hate as like a volume scorer who should have got his teammates more involved, that sort of thing. But I feel like the hate is now completely irrationally above where it should be with that guy. Yeah,
Kobe's just getting it because he's Kobe now. I think Hugh was saying that he doesn't like him because of how he is as a person, which is...
I think that's a reference to previous off-court issues
scandals
that we won't
things.
Which we don't necessarily need to go into.
No, little brief sentence, that sets the scene. That's all it needs. And China's new least favourite team, the Houston Rockets, have won 7 straight, and it literally doesn't matter who's on the court alongside James Harden. No one's stopping them at the moment, and he is actually our first topic of tonight's show. So James Harden, he is, in my opinion, one of the greatest scorers to ever play the game. Playoff knockouts won't change that. I know he's disappeared, but his performances so far this season, certainly over the course of the last 7 games, have cemented his place as one of the greatest offensive players to ever play the game. And I just wanted to get everybody else's thoughts on James Harden and what him and the Houston Rockets are doing this season, because it is kind of him. There's nobody else in that team who's really doing too much.
Yeah, I mean, everything's rooted through him. But I'm going to go there straight away.
Well, we had the Kobe hate, so now we get the James Harden hate. This is how it works.
And this is kind of like, something Nick just said, which really echoes through this, is a volume scorer that should have got his teammates involved more. And I get that Harden, where he is more of a point guard in the sense that he distributes the ball more, this is like, it's just watching one guy. And, if you like that, you like that. I don't particularly like it. but you are right. He is one of the greatest scorers ever to play the game. I think he's doing, things that anytime you do things that put you in the same conversation as Wilt Chamberlain, that's pretty historic. But I wonder if he's the new Wilt Chamberlain, if that makes sense. He's going to put up all these astronomical figures that everyone goes, oh, remember when Wilt did this? And well, I say remember. We obviously don't remember, but we've read about it. Are we going to see the same thing with James Harden? And they're like, they both wear number 13. They're both ridiculously good scorers. They are both, in their own respects, ladies' men. And, if you saw that Reddit thread, you'll know about the how well Harden performs dependent on a city's strip clubs. And Wilt famously was...
Maybe on his previous night's performance, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe. And then Wilt famously at one point was bedding more women than there were days of the year at some ridiculous ratio. I can't remember the figures exactly because that's not the sort of stat I commit to memory. But was Wilt ever remembered as a winner? And will Harden ever be remembered as a winner?
I don't think James, unless the Rockets win a championship in his time there, I don't think so. But the biggest problem James Harden has had is he has, for the last 5 years, been up against quite possibly the greatest basketball team that has ever set foot on the court in the NBA. Like, the Golden State Warriors were just unstoppable, and every single season it seemed to be that you had them as the elite tier above everyone else, and then you had the Houston Rockets. And that's an incredibly high pedestal to stay on for the last few years, and to keep on it this year has been, well, so far 10 games in or whatever is pretty impressive. But I don't think he will be remembered as a winner unless he somehow gets that chip. But unfortunately, it's just the way the world is at the moment when it comes to sports. If you don't win anything, you're deemed irrelevant, which sucks a bit, really.
Yeah, I think my views on this go somewhere in between. And I think, as you were kind of alluding to in the stuff I choose to write about, I like weird stuff. And this is getting pretty weird now with Harden in terms of he's kind of pushing the boundaries of what numbers he can put up and still be hated in terms of, and this is like some sort of avant-garde performance art going on right now. The guy he's leading the NBA in scoring by almost 10 points a game over Bradley Beal in second. Like, this is crazy stuff. It's almost at 40 points a game. Like, but because we've seen this before, not quite this, but in terms of like him putting up silly numbers and then disappointing in the playoffs, until the rest of his career is just championship or bust, whatever happens now, whatever numbers he puts up, it kind of, until he wins a championship, that's it. It's kind of, the record with him is what it is now until one or the other.
Yeah, Matt raised another interesting parallel there. You mentioned, obviously, the Golden State Warriors have been this huge boulder in Harden's career. And Wilt had the same with the Celtics. And yet, maybe it's because Wilt's dead now. Like, and I say that like sympathetically, like I'm not taking the piss out of the guy, but the way that we hold Bill Russell in such esteem now, is that because he's still here, if that makes sense? Like, would we hold Wilt in as high a regard if he was still alive? Like, if you go back and watch the YouTube videos of Wilt, it's disgusting. They made the key even wider because he was just so dominant and things like that. They're both incredibly dominant scorers. It's what I find interesting is that the NBA changed rules for Wilt, whereas Harden is taking an extreme advantage of rule changes and interpretations. That's a variation I like. I don't dislike Harden. I just find it easy to turn my nose up at him.
It's not a pretty style of basketball, and that's what puts people off, isn't it?
I think, and again, I know I'm in the minority here. I actually enjoy watching Harden and the Rockets, and I have done for a number of seasons now. And it's kind of what I was talking about before, where it's this weird experimental thing where, like, it started with 3-point shots with that team as to how many 3-point shots can you and should you shoot a game. And now it's becoming, how many shots should and can your best player on your team take every game? And it's kind of, I'm actually enjoying watching it. It's a weird anomaly on the NBA that I actually, and I get why people don't enjoy watching it, but personally, I actually do.
I think it's a caricature of the very fundamental opinion, and perhaps rightly so, that why would you want the ball in anyone else's hands other than the best player you have? And that's it. They've just sort of, it's just more from there. It's like, well, we could run plays and do X, Y, Z, but then the ball wouldn't be in the hands of the best player we've got. So maybe our chances are better here. I just think, given how in past seasons he's broken down in the playoffs and slowed right down, he seems to be going at an absolutely frantic pace right now. I don't know how long he can keep it up for. And the minute that, the whistles start to get stuck in the refs' mouths in the playoffs and the game slows down, I wonder whether he is still as effective. I think that's going to be the litmus test for me. If he can still play like this, or at least better than he's performed previously in playoffs, then maybe my opinion will start to change on him. But until he becomes more than just a regular season player, then my opinion is set.
You can probably say that the Houston Rockets have been a regular season team. Like, they have been one of the best regular season teams for the last 3 or 4 years, and the second they get to the playoffs, they always get hit by this. They have a real lack of depth, and they tend to struggle defensively.
Or they miss 23 straight threes or something like that against the
and they just have the worst possible luck. And there's never really been anybody there, certainly of the caliber of James Harden, to sort of to support him. And that's one of the things that I think you actually have to admire when it comes to what James Harden has done over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, or 5 years even, is you've had constant change in Houston. Daryl Morey is constantly driving sort of analytics and how basketball is played. I mean, you interviewed Kurt Goldsberry, Small Brawl, and there's a whole section in that about Ryan Anderson being like paid all this money, and everyone was like, hang on a minute, what's going on? He's actually just been waived today, I believe, by the Houston Rockets, and he was sort of the catalyst for this new era where everyone's been obsessed with, taking the three instead of taking a sort of a mid-range jumper. And James Harden has had to play alongside Dwight Howard, who I think he dragged to a Western Conference Finals in 2015, after obviously Dwight had left Los Angeles. And then you had a couple of years of sort of torment where they didn't really know what was going on, and the Warriors would beat the beat on them. And then Chris Paul arrived, and it was supposed to be, we've got a second star, now we can really push on. But that was a second star towards the back end of his career who wasn't exactly a great fit next to James in the first place, and there was clearly some sort of issues between those two. But there's been a constant shift in this team, and it has never had a consistent roster, and I think that's really probably been a detriment to James Harden and the Houston Rockets. So the fact that he's managed to, do what he's done, win an MVP, come second in an MVP, arguably should have won 2 MVPs by now, and to do what he's doing this season is phenomenal. But I think, again, and I'm backing what you've just said, Mike, I think they'll get to the playoffs and they'll struggle. Even if we just look at this roster, I don't know where else they're going to get anything. When you need the unexpected buckets and the last second shots, they're not going to get it from some of these guys. It's just a really oddly constructed roster. But if James keeps doing what he's doing, then they will be one of the top teams in the West, but they won't necessarily challenge anyone in the playoffs.
Now, I realise I'm arguing against myself a bit here, but is my perception of him fair? Because if you look back at their past 8 seasons, 7 seasons, conference semi-finals, conference finals, conference semi-finals, first round, fine, I can mock that. Conference finals, first round. So he's been to 2 conference finals, 2 conference semis. Is this perception that he is a regular season player fair?
Let me jump in there. Let me put something to you. So let's take someone who has a great reputation. Everyone loves them at the moment. Just coming off a championship, Kawhi Leonard. Let's take him. If you replace those guys on the teams they're on, and you put Kawhi Leonard in that Houston roster that they have right now, he plays 50% of the games like he's sitting on at the moment. Is their record better or worse than James Harden playing as he is now? And how many games do the Clippers change in plus minus? And I think James Harden is almost punished for being as good as he is, because I think he's had some flat out bad rosters, and I think this is one of the ways I'd like to think about how good players are, is if you put them on any team in a vacuum without knowing who the rest of the roster is, how good is that team? And he's up there with anyone you want to name as to, without knowing anything about the rest of the roster, how much better does he make a team? And I think he gets punished for being on some bad rosters and through like Chris Paul getting injured, for example, when they lost to the Warriors. It's some bad luck and some bad rosters. And it's interesting, we were talking about them being a regular season team, and I mentioned before we started tonight, I had some trivia for you. So James Harden is actually one of only 4 players to have played in the last 10 playoffs. Can you name the other 3 for a bonus point?
4 players to have played in the last 10 years of the playoffs.
At least the last 10.
At least the last 10 years of the playoffs. JJ Redick
is one. There's 2 more.
And I'll just retire on one. There's 2 more.
10 years.
10 years. Oh, man.
I'll give you a clue. One team is just always in the playoffs.
Yeah, well, I'm hesitant to go, San Antonio.
Yeah.
So someone who's been in San Antonio for 10 years. Oh, someone like Marco Bellinelli.
No, Bellinelli's moved around.
Well, yeah, I get that, but I'm just trying to think because the big 3 are gone.
Yeah.
Who's been there for 10 years?
Shooter.
Well, Redick's not been on the same team for 10 years, has he?
No, exactly. That's
Shooter.
why I went Bellinelli. A shooter.
Yeah.
Ginobili.
No, Ginobili's gone. He's not been in there.
I'm going to give it to you guys. It's Patty Mills and Kyle Korver's the other one. But the only point I was trying to make there is that, so the list is JJ Redick, Kyle Korver and Patty Mills, guys who are just player role
Specialist role
shooting
players.
on very good teams. Patty Mills was lucky to be on the Spurs in that whole time, and Redick and Korver have kind of dipped between winners who get picked up because they're such good shooters. Yet Harden is the only player in the NBA that, as the franchise guy, has led his team to the last 10 straight playoffs.
That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it does surprise me. And I think you made a really quick sweeping comparison to Kobe earlier on and about how he's not as much as, Kobe was a bit of a ball hog. I don't think James Harden is. His assists average throughout his career are higher than Kobe's are, and they will end up higher than Kobe's because Kobe's obviously finished. And I think James Harden has elevated his team in many respects, and it kind of backs up what Nick is saying in that he has had a bunch of sort of odd role players around him, but he's made them all an awful lot better. He elevated Ryan Anderson's game to the point where he was pretty much unplayable most nights. Clint Capella's looked really good and rejuvenated himself in this system because he hasn't had so much pressure on him because a lot of that just is heaped on James every night. And then Eric Gordon, who his career looked a bit all over the place before he ended up in Houston.
Still does. He's Mr. Inconsistent. Honestly, get him on your fantasy league team and you'll be pulling your hair out.
The other guy I'd bring up there is Kenneth Faried, who looked unplayable for several teams there. He comes in, all he has to do is roll to the rim and everyone drifts towards Harden and catch lobs. All of a sudden he looks like a very good NBA player again.
Mm-hmm. And now he's in China. So yeah, I get what you're saying. He can, I can get that, but maybe it's the system then. Maybe he's a byproduct of a this version of Harden is this, it's almost restrictive to the degree that, it is all about him. Yeah. And it's all about either getting to the line or hitting a 3. So maybe it's the system that is just jarring aesthetically. His numbers are great. But
I think that another interesting way of thinking about James Harden is he is the playing under D'Antoni. He is the inverse Steve Nash, as in Nash would be, the system's a little bit different now to what they played in Phoenix, but similar principles. And Nash would play it as a 100% playmaker, was almost a reluctant shooter. And James Harden in the same role is almost the wrong way round in terms of how that role has been played previously.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, a great observation.
Yeah.
The reverse Nash.
His last 7 games are just remarkable. When you look at it on paper, 44, 36, 42, 39, 47, 44, 49. They're second in the West. They are second only in record behind the Lakers, who have 2 superstars on their team who are both performing at an incredibly high level. You can't say that the same of Russell Westbrook this year. It has basically just been James Harden doing everything there. And Yeah, I do think James Harden gets a lot of stick for not, for no real reason really. He's just come up against obstacle after obstacle. He's had bad teams. They've always been at the cutting edge of pushing what's possible on the basketball court, and that's partly down to the fact that Daryl Morey just is constantly innovating. And James has had to adapt to that. Plus, he's also had to go up against, you had Steph Curry and Clay, and then you had Durant added to that mix. And the West is not easy to compete in. And the fact that they've managed to thrive for like the last 5-6 seasons, certainly since sort of 2015, has been remarkable. But yeah, I think James Harden gets a lot of undue stick. So speaking of players who have had unfair stick over the course of their careers, Paul George is another guy who has kind of had it in the air, certainly since he decided to move around and try and force his way to Los Angeles and then actually end up on the Clippers, which was the team that apparently he didn't want to be on, but anyway. He's looked phenomenal in his first 2 games back for the Clippers. He had 37 points in 20 minutes in a 49-point win over the Hawks on Saturday night. And over the course of the 2 games back, he's just had 70 points in 44 minutes, which is scary. His current PER is 57.0, which I think you'd be struggling to find anyone who had a PER that high over 2 games this season. So Paul George is back. The Clippers look like they're ready and getting ready to gear up for a serious run. They've had a bit of a slow start to the season, and obviously a lot of that's probably been down to the sort of sheer amount of roster rotations they've had, and credit Doc Rivers for the way he's handled that and shifted guys in and out of the starting lineup. But it speaks volumes of their depth as well. Paul George back, 70 points over 2 games. You've been impressed?
Have I been impressed? Well, yes. So via Clippers PR, they put out a couple of tweets the other day. According to Basketball Reference, Paul George's 37 points are the most points scored by a player in less than 21 minutes. And according to Elias Sports Bureau, Paul George has 70 points in 2,663 seconds played over his last 2 games. In the last 65 seasons, that's the fewest seconds played over a 2-game span by a player that scored that many points. That's mad. I don't know what's more mad, the fact that they've limited it at 65 seasons when there have been more NBA seasons. So that means that maybe 66 seasons someone did it quicker. I'm guessing it's because the stats were limited, how far they can go back. But his return has been scary for a guy coming off double shoulder surgery. Shoulder injury. Yeah, one of them. And to come out scoring like this, yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
It's almost like having shoulders that work as important.
Do you know what's amazing is, especially in a game where you shoot overhead, essentially, like. We were talking about him. He was a distant 3rd place MVP candidate. And last March, I think it was March, he was absolutely on a tear.
Yeah, he was.
And then, no pun intended, because then he tore his labrum in his shoulder. It did something to his shoulder. And immediately his scoring and everything was hampered all the way into the playoffs, where people started then picking him apart.
And then Dame hit a game winner over him.
Yeah. This guy is good. He's an MVP caliber player. He's a Defensive Player of the Year caliber player, and he's teamed up with a guy who can be just that. It's this Clippers record at the minute is not reflective of how good this team will be, and it's scary. I don't think it
matters to them, though, does it? They just, as long as they get into the playoffs at any sort of seed, they really do not care where they are as long as they're there.
One thing I haven't seen talked about very much is how complimentary Paul George is for Kawhi, not only when they eventually play together, but on the nights Kawhi sits, as it seems he's going to do a lot of. Paul George can essentially just be the same guy in terms of how they run the offense through him. They're broadly similar skill sets offensively. I think George shoots threes a bit more and Kawhi prefers mid-range, but you can essentially run the same plays for George that you've been running for Kawhi. So they're kind of interchangeable. So it actually kind of bodes well for how healthy they'll be come playoff time as well.
Yeah, 100%. And we know that Paul, as capable as he is of leading a team, is not afraid or got too big of an ego to be deferential. When we saw it at times with Westbrook last year, even though he was the de facto best player on that team, there were times when he would sit back and let Westbrook take the reins. Even times before in the season before where they, for some reason, let Carmelo do it. I just think this team is going to be scary. They're already scary, but like really scary. We've talked about how last week on the pod how the Lakers were doing, so well, and they're still on a huge winning streak, and they're a defense first team. And what's crazy is they might not be the best defensive team in LA.
Yeah, because we just haven't seen the Clippers' Death Star all operating at once effectively. The remarkable thing is that they did this last season. They were winning games even without stars, and this year with obviously Kawhi sitting and Paul George being out for a bit, they've still managed to sneak through and win some of those really tough games. Opening night, they obviously handed the Lakers one, and against the Hawks the other night, I know they were up by like 50 points at one stage, which was ridiculous, but it's got to be a good thing getting everybody on the roster involved, and everybody on the roster that night had points, whether it was 2 points or 25 points, everyone was getting in there and getting productive and doing something. And that only makes for a better sort of team chemistry, I think, throughout the regular season, is the fact that, even if you are a bit part role player, you're probably going to get some valuable time throughout the season, because that's the way Doc Rivers runs his teams. And that's the way that, this whole load management thing works out with Kawhi, is that other guys do get more of a chance to step in, and then that benefits them in the long run, because they're more capable of, providing when it comes to like the crunch time in the playoffs, which we saw with the Raptors last year. You had bit part role players coming in and having really good impacts. And now this season, some of those Raptors players have taken that a step further.
Yeah, to me, they're like the Raptors on roids. This Clippers team, are they
T-Rexes? I'm sorry, that's so bad.
They have players there who significantly scare me more than a lot of the Raptors role players. People like Siakam aside.
Yeah, Siakam. It's a relative unknown with Siakam, is you don't really know what you're going to get, and his basketball fundamentals are still so raw because he's been playing the game for such a short space of time. That's what's frightening about Pascal Siakam. But yeah, no, I get your point. Like Montrezl Harrell and Lou Williams have got that brilliant pick and roll combo that's been so effective for the last 2 seasons. JaMychal Green is a guy that I am obsessed with. I think he's just the ultimate role player.
I still can't believe Memphis traded him.
Yeah, he never says anything bad in the press or anything negative. You never see anything about him. He just gets out there and he plays. He's shooting the 3-pointer at his highest percentage of his career so far. And then Patrick Patterson, like we were saying at the start of the year, if Patrick Patterson actually goes onto that roster and has some form of an impact, even if it's a minor one, then this team is scary, because you've got a bunch of really great role players surrounded by 2 of the best players in the league. And the rookies are playing well as well. So it's all, La La Land's great for basketball at the moment.
I think one of the underappreciated things about Paul George is he was exactly 10 for 17 in both his games so far. Can he keep that up for the whole season? That would be even more impressive than James Harden stuff.
Yeah, that would be frightening. It's just the game looks so easy to him at times, even though he has had dodgy shoulders. I think him and Kawhi are those 2 players you can just watch, and you're constantly every night, probably Durant as well, you're blown away by how easy the game just comes to them. And it's both ends as well. They are the modern wing. Like they do, they're great offensive players, but they also significantly contribute on a defensive end. And that's what makes these guys truly frightening, is they make up for the gaps that sort of the evolution of the center has caused the last few years. Centers now are sort of less likely to try and win a rebound. And these guys make up for that. And you see the same over in like Dallas. Dallas are not a great rebounding team. But because Luka's there, and Luka is so aggressive on the boards to make up for the fact that he's not a great defender on the perimeter, they've actually turned out to be like a middling of the road sort of average rebounding team this season. And the Clippers are like, that on steroids, like Mike was saying, because these 2 guys are just constantly trying to crash the boards. Plus you've got Harrell in there, like they're a bit undersized, but it doesn't matter because they make up for it in the way that they go after the ball. So yeah, the Clippers are really a frightening prospect. Anyway, we're going to have a little quick ad break, and then we'll be back to discuss everyone's favourite topic, Carmelo Anthony. Let's just take a quick break to talk about our friends at NBAstore.eu, Europe's official online NBA store. We've teamed up with them to give you 15% off orders using the code DCPOD15.
Do you have a new favourite player, a new favourite jersey, or just want to cop a classic throwback? Make sure you remember to use DCPOD15 at checkout.
With everything from the latest City jerseys to hardwood classics, stamped socks and Spalding balls, NBAstore.eu has you covered significantly better than Bogdanovic covered LeBron for that monster dunk on Friday night.
Offer excludes sale and clearance items, but what are you waiting for? Head on over to NBAstore.eu now and use the code DCPOD15 at the checkout. Right, after that fantastic silky smooth ad break by Mike Miller over there, we're going to move on and discuss Carmelo Anthony, who is a favourite topic of ours. We have spent the last 6 years doing this podcast, and Melo has come up probably on a good 75% of the podcast. He seems to be quite a popular topic amongst NBA fans, good or bad. But the 35-year-old forward is returning to the NBA after a brief period away wearing hoodies. And he is joining the Portland Trailblazers. So we've got the perfect people to talk about this, actually, because we've got our resident, doesn't think he's a Blazers fan, but is a Blazers fan, Mike Miller. And then we've got our Knicks fan, who's called Nick. Brilliant.
Do you want to go on this first, Nick?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I have a love-hate relationship with Carmelo Anthony, always have, in terms of in his prime. I really appreciated as much as anyone his offensive talent, his ability to score, his how unguardable he is in the mid-range, or was, I should say, in the mid-range and the post. Became a better shooter as well. But I think what I saw from him as the Knicks franchise player was never really someone who was going to be the best player on a championship team. And if you're that sort of player and you're not the best player on the team, it's hard for you to be on a team, essentially, because the entire way he plays or has played, from how we've seen in the NBA, is ball stopping. It's catching the ball, other guys spacing the floor and letting him go to work. So when you're transitioning to become a role player in that scenario, it's pretty difficult to anticipate what that version of Melo even looks like, because he's an inconsistent shooter from the three-point range. He's not the best defender. He can turn it up when he wants to, but he's never been the best defender. Even a slightly reluctant rebounder, which for someone who teams have always wanted him to play power forward and he's always wanted to play small forward, it's always been a point of conflict. So I don't really know what to expect here in terms of, you have to assume, I think, we're going to see a humbled Melo with all these teams having not wanted to hire him, and he's been kind of begging for work almost. But I'm interested to see how he fits in. There's two high usage guards in Portland. So is Melo going to sit in the corner? What's he going to do there? I don't know.
I think that's great observations. I am a reluctant...
Come on, say how it is. Come on, get it off your chest.
I get why the Blazers have signed him. I get why. They are struggling right now. But this guy's not the answer. No. But I get that maybe he's less of a negative than Mario Hezonja, but he's still a negative. Like, I don't know what they were looking for. They need defense and rebounding and size. And so they've gone for what? An undersized power forward who is, as Nick said, a reluctant rebounder and doesn't play defense or can't play defense. One of the reasons the Rockets got rid of him last year, and I can't remember whose article it was. Yeah, it was during the summer. I read an article about it, and it was basically one of the training staff at the Rockets who didn't want to go on record with his name or whatever had said there was real concerns that he could still play defense at an NBA level. Not even just passable defense. He's not been a decent scorer for a couple of seasons now. Like, I get they only played 10 games last year, but in terms of the 78 he played in Oklahoma the season before, I think he was in the 9th percentile, which basically means that 91% of the NBA had better points per shot attempts than he did. And that's not good at all whatsoever, especially for a guy who spent his whole career effectively being a black hole when it comes to the offensive end. Like, what are we going to see? Unless we have a dramatically different and changed Carmelo, I don't know how this is going to help the Blazers win. All it's going to do is take shots away from Lillard, who has been fantastic. CJ's been a bit of a wobble to start the season. Maybe he helps, but I'm not looking forward to it.
I get what you're saying. I think that there is some form of justification to bringing Melo in, and it's probably more of a sort of immediate reaction to the loss against the Blazers the other night, where admittedly the Raptors, where admittedly the Raptors were shorthanded and won that game through just being a better team, and their defensive strategy was swarm Damian Lillard, close out on CJ and just cause havoc for those two guys, and then rely on this sort of really inadequate backup role players to bail them out. And the Blazers went through a big change this summer, and they lost quite a lot of those really effective role players that played such a big role for them during their sort of playoff run last year. You lost Maurice Harkless, you lost Jake Layman, even Evan Turner. Like, they were significant guys who, I know we gave Evan Turner all kinds of stick for that contract.
Yeah, don't come at me with Evan Turner as a
they contributed
off
the bench, and they aren't
Evan
getting
Turner
that.
didn't score for like the first 4 games of the playoffs.
They're not getting that from anyone this season, though. It's fine for 4 games. We're talking about the regular season, not the playoffs. Like, they've got Zach Collins is out injured. He's due back soon, I think. Pau Gasol's obviously out. Nurkic is out. They are dealing with a lack of depth at the moment, they haven't got the sort of the backup strength and numbers that they kind of had last year. You had 3 or 4 role players that have since left this team, and they are really suffering for it on the defensive end. And it spelled the whole Carmelo move to me is like, oh Christ, did you see what they did the other night? Like, they stopped Damian, they stopped CJ. Nobody else could score. Nobody else in this roster is good enough offensively to get us back in this game. Let's take a punt on Carmelo Anthony, who 4 years ago was averaging 22 points a night. So we will see if we can get something back from him, for what is effectively nothing. So it's a shot in the dark effectively for the Blazers organization. But they've been a bit all over the place with their decisions anyway the past few years. So it's not really surprising that they're one of the teams that is willing to take a gamble. I mean, even like LeBron James, who runs the Los Angeles Lakers and is Carmelo Anthony's best friend, did not want to bring him into the Lakers situation.
I do like how you've just underscored the reason behind this move by pointing out that the Blazers have a history of making ridiculous decisions.
They do.
Yeah, no, I know. I completely agree. It just makes me laugh. He's been a net negative rating for the last 3 years, right? And he's never been a plus on defense. If you really think he's going to wind the clock back at 35 to back when he was 31, then I beg to differ.
This sounds to me like you're still expecting Carmelo Anthony to come off and try and, they're not expecting him to come in and score 20 points tonight. They're expecting him to play, 12 minutes, come in, get 12 buckets or whatever, and that might be the difference maker in the game.
You're expecting him to be able to come in a reduced role and be efficient. And
that's what he needs to do. He needs to humble the hell up.
Yeah, exactly. But he also, he that's a quick transition for him. I say it's quick transition. He's not been great for a few years.
Well, he's had a year off, and nobody's shown any interest in him. Surely that's kind of had some form of effect on his psyche.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's not willing to do it. I'm asking if he's able. This guy has been like the apex predator on whatever team he's been on until he went to OKC. And at that point, when it was like, oh, hang about, actually, I need to think about, we look at someone like Vince Carter, who was the franchise player in Toronto, and then he was, and then similar in New Jersey, and then sort of started sliding when he went to Orlando, and actually has embraced the slide and is now in his 21st season. We look at someone like Melo, and he's just resisted it to the point, in a similar fashion to the way Kobe did. And where it was detrimental to his teams, Kobe still insisted. Oh God, we're talking about Kobe again. Anyway, the Blazers were very fortunate last year with injuries. I think they only had 63 games lost through injury, which was like a league best. And this year, it's come back to bite them. I just don't think for the problems they have, he's necessarily I get that the options were limited, but I just don't think he's necessarily the answer.
I've got a question for both of you. Was it a coincidence that the Blazers actually won their first game after agreeing to sign Carmelo Anthony? Do you think they were all like,
we don't need him. We don't need him. Don't let him in.
The only thing I can think that actually would make sense in my head is one of the guys who they lost from last season, but actually did really well there, was Enes Kanter. And I think the reason why he worked was because he provided some level of inside out to their offense. And if they're going to use Melo in a similar way, where he comes in against bench units, he gets 3 or 4 possessions to see if he's hot that night, and then that's it. And they either run him a little bit if he's feeling it, or out he goes, maybe try again the next night. That's the only role that makes sense for him at this point, I think.
What I do like is that the move is it's an unguaranteed contract. So if it doesn't work, it can be ended. I like that. I like that a lot.
Or if someone better appears in the next couple of days.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing that appeared in the Slack earlier. Ryan Anderson. Would Ryan Anderson provide a better alternative than Carmelo? Well, he's a much more consistent 3-point threat. He's also, a matador on defense. And the way that the Blazers work with 2 undersized guards, the way the modern NBA works in general, is you need to spread the floor.
Yeah.
Carmelo herky-jerky in the post doesn't spread the floor. So maybe Ryan Anderson would have been a better pick.
Yeah, and he would probably be a good shout, because if he comes in, then we know he can still contribute. So that then means that, Lillard's numbers probably drop, so he doesn't have to play 40 minutes a game or whatever it is, because you're getting a little bit of extra offensive production from Ryan Anderson. Whereas I don't think you can guarantee it with Melo.
Yeah, but I think the big difference between those two guys is that Melo could create, albeit an inconsistent from 3, and he shoots analytically not great mid-range jump shots, whereas Ryan Anderson would shoot the 3, is that Melo can create his own shot. Ryan Anderson would literally be waiting to catch a pass, and then you're relying on getting him the ball.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll say about Ryan Anderson is he's been at the Rockets now. He's played in 2 games, I think, this season. And if the Houston Rockets won't play a shooter, there's a reason why they're not playing that person.
Yeah, no, true. Considering he was the guy who got the monster contract a few years ago, because he was the future of the 4 in the NBA. Considering
he was the guy who on a podcast at one point, I rather tongue-in-cheek, but I called him MVP Ryan Anderson. He was on fire. I think was that 3 seasons ago?
It might have been.
Oh man, I like Ryan Anderson.
Big fans.
Yeah, I met him in the summer. It was good.
Okay,
he was a very nice guy.
Final decision on the move: yes or a no for the Melo move?
In a vacuum, no.
No. Nick?
I'm going to say a qualified yes, assuming
qualified the yes.
Assuming it's for the role I talked about, where he comes off the bench, he gets a couple of post touches, and then disappears again if he's missing.
Yeah, no, I'm not willing to say that Melo deserves 40 minutes a night yet.
But also, I think I should just get in there. I'd like nothing more than to see Carmelo Anthony have a good ending to his career. I'd love it to happen. It's just not something I think is likely.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. But hopefully, I wonder what kind of shape he's in, because obviously but we're recording this on a Monday night, and the Blazers will play the Rockets tonight, and Melo is joining them on this road trip. What are the chances that we get a Carmelo revenge game?
I don't think he's playing tonight, is he?
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. I don't think he's going to play.
I think ESPN reported he's going to be on Tuesday. So I think the Pelicans will be his first game, I think.
That would have been rather poetic if he had got back tonight.
Yeah, either that or the Raptors know how terrible his defense is, and would not the Raptors, the Rockets know how terrible his defense is, and we're just going to milk him for all he was worth.
Yeah, that's probably
James Harden had 100 points, and basically did a wilt.
The Wilt Chamberlain comparisons continue because James Harden put 100 up on Melo.
Yeah.
And suddenly no one remembers that Jalen Rose got 81 on him.
My God, that would be amazing. Right, moving on to the Toronto Raptors. Just a quick one here. The Raptors and their rings. A little bit of controversy from sort of the end of last week. I seem to remember it was just towards the weekend. The Raptors will not be giving Jonas Valanciunas, Delon Wright and CJ Miles championship rings for their parts, the parts they played in the Raptors championship season last year. Yeah, it's an odd one, this, because Valanciunas played, 6.5 years for the Raptors, and certainly contributed towards at least 25, 30 games last season, was playing okay before he was traded to Memphis. The other guys, not too sure about. I know. Delon Wright had an absolute monster year after he was traded, but rings are a strange one because there seems to be an ongoing occurrence in American sports is players get traded and then sometimes they get a ring and sometimes they don't. It seems to be purely down to sort of you either have a player vote in some of the leagues. I think the NHL might have a player vote, or you have management make the call. And yeah, the Raptors have made. I think they've pulled a stinker here. I think they all should have just got one.
I flip-flopped on this because when I first got it, I was like, yeah, they shouldn't get one. Why should they get one? They weren't playing in the finals. They didn't suit up. But then you think about all the guys who didn't suit up, who, like OG Anunoby was part of the roster but didn't play in the playoffs. Should he get a ring?
He's from London, so he's excused.
Yeah, that was our contractually stipulated one mention of OG per episode. Well, like Valanciunas, should he have got one 6.5 years? Well, not being funny, they didn't win in those 6.5 years. They didn't win anything.
No, and you can argue these guys got a lot of money for doing what they were doing anyway. So.
Exactly, and as if I would like to think that if I was an NBA talent, which I'm obviously not, that if my team won without me, I wouldn't want that ring. I would want to go out and prove that I would get one of my own for playing on the floor. I saw a tweet that was someone was pointing out that, you know, they went where was it? They went 23-7 to start the season, and had they not got that, they probably wouldn't have had the home court advantage. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
like, you could do the sort of, you know, open-ended it, maybe ifs, buts, but if they hadn't have got Marc Gasol, they might not have got through any of the other teams. Like, if they hadn't have got these other guys, they might not have even made it into the second round, that sort of thing. Who knows? You can't, I don't know, I just don't like the idea of saying it's not fair because of an unknown.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm not sure how well Valanciunas would have matched up against Joel Embiid, but we knew from the stats going in the Marc Gasol Joel Embiid matchup was only going to go one way, and it went the right way.
I think I see both sides to this debate with the rings, and I actually think this is something. I think there's enough grey area there where the NBA should actually make a ruling, and this is a rare example where I think football actually does something more logically than basketball, where the general rule is if you've played in or you're named to the team in a certain number of games, you will receive a ring versus not receive a ring. So then there's no grey area or controversial decision to be made. If it's 40 games or whatever, including the playoffs that you played in, but then you were traded or whatever, you still get the ring. And if it was 39, sorry, bad luck, you don't get it. You didn't make the game requirement. I think that's the only way it would actually be fair for everyone.
Do you know that's actually a football rule I knew? And it's weird, like, this is how far back my football knowledge is based. It was to do with David May and Man United.
Wow.
So that must have been mid to early 90s. I vaguely remember something similar happening with him. But it would be interesting to see that implemented, because at the minute it's down to the franchise. And I think they did their research, consulted with other franchises, and the only instance they knew of where a player had got a ring when he wasn't part of it was Varejao on when he was with the Warriors and then was waived, I think, or was stretched. Yeah, because he ended up being traded to free up a spot. And he went to Portland, then he was waived and went to the Warriors. Anyway, whatever it was, he was the only one who got a ring. So there's sort of a principle in the NBA that if you're not there, you don't get it. But it does. I think the idea that Nick put forward would make a lot of sense.
There was a lot of rumours swirling around this as well, because you had some people tweeting saying that these three guys were asked whether they wanted rings, and some of them said no. But then there was all that the organisation had made this decision, and then I think Valanciunas came out and said that he'd had a conversation with Lowry before the season about ring sizes, and it all seems a little bit.
How cold is that? Is that happens? What's your ring size? Doesn't matter.
But like the argument for these three is probably there because they were all having good seasons when the Raptors were, right on top of the Eastern Conference and were contributing without Leonard, and they were a big part of that. So it is what it is. But it seems to happen. There's no hard or fast rule when it comes to getting a ring in pro sports at the moment, apart from obviously what you just mentioned in football. But they need to sort something out because it sucks a bit.
if they think that based on 6.5 years service, Valanciunas deserves one, then send one to Detroit for Dwayne Casey and send one to San Antonio for DeMar DeRozan. No.
I have to say, Mike, I think you deserve a championship ring for your level of knowledge on NBA transactions involving Anderson Varejao. That's stellar stuff.
It was because Portland were involved, and I remember they got him.
Was that another bad decision?
Yeah, massively. And I was just like, why? What have you done? Why? And then a couple of days later, he was stretched. Yeah.
Well
Fun
done.
times.
Well done, Neil O'Shea. Right. Trivia. Bum, 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 hand it over to our host.
Trivia. We missed last week, but we got some more this week.
Well, there was only me and you last week. It wasn't really, you could have just
been quizzing you.
Beaten up on me, like,
At least you wouldn't have lost.
Well, true.
So, I picked some really difficult ones
I can't
this
remember
week.
if I won the first one, though. I can't. That's going too far back 2 weeks.
I think you drew 1-1.
There
we go. So you're currently 1-on. Well, no, you're not even 1-on-1.
But your trivia relies on paying attention all week, and I have struggled this past week.
It doesn't. I've gone really obscure this time. Well, not that
great.
obscure. It's loosely related to this week. So
is it all about
one.
Anderson Varejao?
It is. Bradley Beal became the 5th player in franchise history to score 10,000 points for the Wizards. Name any of the other 4 players. I was probably ought to tell Nick the rules first, but we've started now. So name any of the other 4 Wizards to have scored 10,000 points.
Gilbert Arenas?
Nope. You're frozen out.
Spencer Haywood?
No, you're frozen out. Oh, you're both frozen out. Oh, no, game over. The world ends. No, go on. You both go again. There's a really obvious
Elvin
one.
Haynes or someone, isn't it?
There's a really obvious one.
Elvin Hayes?
Elvin Hayes, get in there. That wasn't the one I thought you were going to get.
You weren't listening to me.
Oh, really? I didn't hear you at all. Okay, so yeah, Elvin Hayes, you take the point for that one. Followed by Jeff Malone. John Wall was the one I thought you guys would have just gone straight off the bat.
Wall?
And then the guy who won
He's been
Rookie
injured
of the
too
Year.
much.
He has. And MVP in the same season. The only guy to do it. Wes Unseld. There you go. So that's question 1. 1-0 to Matt.
That's the sort of random fact you pick up on 2K.
It's fastest first, but you get frozen out if you give a wrong answer. It's simple as that. So question 2. There are 3 players with at least 3 30-point and 10-assist games this season. Who are they?
Luka Doncic, LeBron
Correct.
James.
Correct.
Kawhi Leonard?
No.
Oh.
Come on, you just need one, Nick, to steal it.
James Harden?
No.
30 points and 10 assists, you said, right?
30. Yeah. At least 3 players with at least 3 30-point 10 assists. So he's had to have 10 assists 3 times.
Oh, it's Trae Young.
There you go. Boom. Okay. 1-1.
I got 2/3 of that.
And you still lost. So you got to take it over the line. Which Laker needs 5 steals to pass Derek Harper for 14th place in NBA history?
Rajon Rondo?
No. Frozen out.
Danny Green.
No. Everyone in.
LeBron James.
Win. 2-1.
Oh, if there's an all-time stat, the answer is always LeBron.
yeah, exactly.
We look bad for not picking him straight away. Sorry.
Totally.
It seemed too obvious.
So I've assisted with the next one, so you don't pick him.
Might like some skill.
So, question 4. Oh, and for anyone who's listening, tell us how you do on this, because, let's make it interactive. Carmelo Anthony is poised to become the 3rd player selected in the 2003 NBA draft to be active this season. LeBron is one of them. Who is the 3rd? We've mentioned him on this show already today.
Ryan Anderson?
No. But you're thinking along the right lines in terms of...
Kyle Korver?
Yes. There you go. Well done. What's that? Is that
2-2?
2-2. Oh, man, it all comes down to this. And it's a doozy.
Oh, great.
The Cavaliers host the Blazers this Saturday, the 23rd. But what will all fans in attendance receive as a giveaway? This made me laugh when I heard it earlier because they tried to sell it as something really good and it's not.
Is it a Mario Hezonja bobblehead?
No, it's not. No, it's Cavs are hosting, so the Cavs are the home team. But you got any guesses at all?
Is it
I've got a backup question.
Do they get like a sword or something?
No, it's a fanny pack brought to you by Mountain Dew. I found that hilarious earlier.
That's random.
So that's 2-2. So we'll have a tiebreaker question.
So I've drawn again for the second week in a
exactly.
third.
But from now on, there's no ties because this is basketball. We're going overtime. So this is a final question. So this is we've had 4 weeks of the new NBA season, which in my fantasy league means 4 matchups because we play weekly head-to-heads. How many matchups have I lost?
2.
1.
I'll go with Nick as the winner. I've lost none, so I'll go closest on that one just to get this hell over
disgusting.
with. But yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there as bragging rights because I've never ever gone 4-0. And wait, and I looked at it, and this is how much my sort of analytical mind hits it. My strength of schedule has been seriously in my favour. That's been an easy schedule. Everyone I've beat has been right at the doldrums of this league. So expect my unbeaten record to finish this week.
So not only are we supposed to keep an eye on the NBA, but we're also supposed to keep an eye on your fantasy league.
100%. It was just a finger in the air. Overtime, closest to it wins.
Who's carrying your team, Mike? Who are your big winners, fantasy wise?
Damian Lillard, and Andre Drummond.
Oh,
who's been an absolute behemoth. I think he's posted 4 2020s.
Yeah, he was on a tear at the start of the season.
Yeah, he was. Need Blake to. I don't wish injury on anyone. I'm not going to say that.
Cut short in your tracks.
Yeah, stop myself. But another random thing. Apparently, we're cursing players as well. I've had some feedback, and the amount of players we talk about at length about how good they are, and then they suddenly become sidelined for prolonged periods of time through injury or substance intake. So there's another bit.
Well, we did like an hour on Luka the other week, and he's still fine.
Yeah, no, don't say that.
The NBA is testing him as we speak.
Yeah. Wow. Don't mention them in that context. Yeah. Anyway, to quickly wrap this up before I just send us down some really weird meandering route.
So before we go on to the games of the week, Nick, we will go with you first, seeing as this is your debut show and you're putting up a 50-piece.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So on Wednesday at 3 a.m, Celtics Clippers, 2 teams I like to watch, both running small ball lineups, a lot of good forwards in those teams matching up. And then Sunday 24th at the delightfully pleasant time of 8:30 p.m, Dallas at Houston. And what I like about this matchup is going back to a debate I launched in our Slack channel as to why James Harden gets so much hate and Luka Doncic is so loved when they have both high usage rates used in similar ways. We have those 2 guys matching up. So excited to watch that one.
Are you guys enjoying the early West Coast games? Because obviously we had the Sacramento home game yesterday. And it was good to hear. Do you know Sacto King, Danny Williamson? He's been on the pod before. He got a shout out on the game call from Grant Napier, who's basically said he was there watching with his son. It's one of the few times they've been able to watch a live Sacramento Kings game. So that's a quality little addition this year. Earlier West Coast games. I assume you guys are loving it as well.
It's helping. Not that I've stayed up for many of them live this season, but it's nice to not have to stay up so late to watch some games on like a Friday and a Saturday night. So yeah.
Yeah, I think just to see a wider variety of players live as well, or more easily at least, without having to stay up until 3 a.m. or whatever. Yeah, it's awesome.
It's a really strange league because we spend all our time avoiding it, and then like someone says, did you see so-and-so? And obviously if you're watching in the States and we've got access to all these games going on at the same time, you kind of just see and take everything in, whereas over here we have to be a bit more specific and hunt out the stuff that people are going on about.
Are you referring to your no spoilers position?
Yes,
I've embraced the spoilers. I'm
not too bad with the regular season. Again, I can live with it.
Yeah, regular season, I'm all in for the spoilers. Let me know. I'm all over it as soon as I wake up in the morning. In fact, some of the games are still on when I wake up, which is really quite cool. Anyway, the game I've picked is Saturday 23rd at 12:30 a.m, so Sunday morning, really, and it's Jimmy Butler back in Philadelphia with his Miami Heat, a team that are outperforming expectations versus a team that aren't quite performing to expectations at the minute. So could be a nice one.
Yeah, nice one. And I've picked the Houston Rockets versus Los Angeles Clippers, which is at 3:30 a.m. on Saturday. That's on Sky Sports Arena, obviously featuring James Harden, Paul George, and hopefully Kawhi Leonard. So well worth a watch, that one. It's on Sky, so we like to plug some of the Sky games. There's been some really good Sky games at the start of this season as well. So, and I'm not just saying that because the Knicks Mavericks game the other night was a cracker, which it was. It was a cracker.
If only the Knicks could play Dallas every game.
Yeah, I think someone said that at 82-0 or something.
That would be amazing for the booze alone, because Kristaps was really getting it, and then he had that awkward moment where he almost walked down his own into his own locker room. Yeah, that was a bit awkward. Anyway, if you've enjoyed the podcast, please do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you listen and download our show. Please do subscribe if you have not done so already. Share us out to all your friends. Go and check us out on YouTube and all the other channels. TikTok's a thing that we need to get on, according to Nick, so we probably should do that at some point. Does that include like 10-second vines of you just saying stupid stuff?
Yeah, or Mike Miller dressed up and dancing.
That's worth the subscription alone.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like the sort of thing I'd do, definitely.
Yeah. If also on this podcast feed, actually, this very podcast feed, you will have noticed a new podcast popped up called the Basketball Movies Podcast, which is hosted by Josh Coyne, and he went and explored in quite a lot of detail for something that I didn't think you could go that much detail into. Space Jam. He kind of tore it apart and spoke to loads of different guests and went through it and went over how they coordinated the basketball scenes and with animated characters. It was just it's really interesting. So go and download that. That's
forensic detail.
Yeah, forensic detail, which is what Josh Coyne's become good at. And the website, as always, doubleclutch.uk. Loads and loads of really fantastic content has gone up there the past week. We've had some funny photoshops where I've had to put LeBron James' son's head on LeBron James' body, which was an interesting one.
That looks weird, isn't it?
It does look really strange. Sean Guest is back doing his brilliance on there, and Justin's doing what he normally does, exceptional level writers, and everyone's just, really chipping and starting the season. So please go and check out the website. Guys, what's your Twitter handles so people can send abuse and harassment at you, I should say.
Mike Miller _time.
At NJ Whitfield.
Oh, and mine's at Matt Smash. You can also follow us at Double Clutch UK on Twitter. Please do use hashtag NBA in the UK if you're watching any of the live games, if you're watching Sky games. We keep an eye out for them, and we do like to build sort of conversations around them. If you've got any conversations and questions for the podcast, you can contact any of us really, or you can email us admin@doubleclutch.uk. But yeah, it's been a fun one, guys. Hopefully we'll be back at some point next week.
Awesome.
Toodaloo.